Our friend Chad Bilyeu, also known as Chad in Amsterdam, has been busy. He's recently released the second issue of The Re-Up, the story of when he became a pot dealer in the Washington, D.C. area circa 2004, and has curated the anthology Megillah Sunday Funnies, a collection of 35 one-page comics by a variety of indie artists, some of whom we've previously discussed on this show. This week, Kumar and I review both publications. We were going to limit ourselves to talking about just 6 of the comics in the anthology, but we just couldn't do it. There was just too much high-quality work there. First, if you appreciate the work we do on Deconstructing Comics and our other podcasts and want bonus content, we'd love it if you'd support the show at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. Our monthly issue-by-issue look at 1960s Amazing Spider-Man comics is available to patrons, chipping in at least $4 a month. Check out our goals and rewards and pledge your support now at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim.
And this is Kumar.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Kumar in Melbourne. How you doing?
Very best. How are you?
Okay. So we've had a habit over the years of reviewing all the stuff from Chad in Amsterdam. And a year or two ago, maybe 3, we declared that he had graduated from critiquing comics and we started putting his stuff on Deconstructing Comics. And it used to be that it was always Mulele and I would do it, but he is now 100% retired from podcasting, and he gets out and he doesn't let anybody pull him back in. So
I do feel like the second Darren on Bewitched at the moment.
Yeah, you're let's see, Dick Sargent. Is that or Dick York?
Right.
They're both named Dick, but I've forgotten now which one's which. I think Dick Sargent's the second one.
Okay.
Anyway, so Chad has sent us some more stuff, actually a couple of things. And the first one is the second issue of The Re-Up, which Mulele and I talked about a year ago or so, the first issue. So this is the story of how Chad, when he was living in the D.C. area, became a pot dealer. This is apparently about 2004. Because we got a character in this story talking about he's going to vote for Bush again.
Well, I'll also say that the Nokia phones, that phone is it was such a shock to the system seeing that again. It was a real nostalgia hit. And they've employed it on the cover in a clever way, too. But were the Chad and Amsterdam comics drawn by different people, like a range of different people, or was there one artist, or how did it work?
Well, so the Chad and Amsterdam series, he pulls in a variety of artists. For the Re-Up, both issues have been drawn by Juliette DeWitt. But, Chad doesn't draw, so he'll call up different artists and whatever fits the project.
I have to say, I don't know what you guys said about the first issue, but I'm amazed that this person, Juliette DeWitt, was not from the DC area.
I had that thought, too. You'd think
it's shocking. It is shocking.
You'd think she must have lived in the DC area in 2004, because it really looks like, like American landscape and the inside of a hotel room and everything. It just like she was drawing off of photographs or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, now the Nokia phone I don't have experience with. I never had I don't remember what I had before I had an iPhone. They were Japanese makers, I think.
Yeah, I think I downgraded, like when I moved to Australia in 2004. So I had a pretty decent phone in Japan, but when I came here, they were still like 20 years behind. Or I should say 10 years behind or something. So I ended up getting the cruddiest, like that Nokia, which was ubiquitous. It was everywhere. Everyone kind of had them. And I kind of still wish I had it because the battery actually lasted. Like it didn't have planned obsolescence built into it, where it was meant to die after 2 years or whatever. It just seemed to go forever. And I did keep it and use it for a very long time before I ended up upgrading. Yeah.
And he's playing like a snake game or something?
Yeah. There were 4 or 5 little games really like with like Atari level graphics or worse than Atari level graphics on the phone. And Snake was one of them. Another one was called Bantumi, which is like this kind of like traditional game of moving these pebbles around and this. Anyway, yeah. So Snake was one of them that you would definitely waste your time on. If you were really, really stuck with nothing else to do, you'd play Snake on your Nokia.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. That's one of several kind of digressions in the story. I mean, it's kind of showing us, Chad likes to explain things in his comics, and he's explaining like all of the ins and outs of being a pot dealer when it was still illegal. But yeah, I mean, we go off into this, several panels of him playing the Snake game on his phone.
Well, it's actually a clever way of showing how long he's waiting to get to see the dealer, because you can see the little snake moving around the screen, and it's like he's sitting there playing this thing for an hour or however long he's got to sit there wasting his time on it. It's actually, I think if you had that phone and played that game, it's a pretty good indicator of how much time you're just sitting there waiting to get into the doctor's office or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't identify with it. I'm like, what's this?
Right.
What's going on here?
Right.
I was playing, what was it, Zookeeper on my phone in 2004.
Weird, okay.
In color.
Yes.
On a flip phone. Yeah. Anyway, then there's also a place where he's driving like through DC and he's listening to TV on the radio's what's the name? Desperate Youth, Bloodthirsty Babes album.
Okay.
And we've got some of the lyrics shown in the comic. And yeah, it's kind of a digression because TV on the radio doesn't really have anything to do with his pot dealing. But yeah, then when he arrives at his destination, he's thinking about how he's just, driven pot across state lines and through DC, and he's kind of all in at this point because it's too late to back out.
Yeah. Well, I don't know anything about TV on the radio. Is that like a real indicator of 2004? Was it brand new at the time?
Yeah, I believe that is the year that album came out.
Okay.
Yeah, I was kind of a fan of theirs for a while. I have 3 of their albums.
Okay.
I got a little frustrated with them, though, because their lyrics are... If you're listening to the song, for one thing, the singer's pronunciation when he's singing is not kind of clear enough to make everything out. And even when you think you've made it out, then you look at the written lyrics and find you were wrong. And there are all kinds of puns and stuff in their lyrics that you just can't get if you're not looking at it written out.
Right.
But anyway, now I'm digressing. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to see, things that you might not have thought of that are issues that come up when you're involved in this business.
Yeah, so actually in both issues, it's really, the pacing is really interesting and it's engaging. And then when you get into the nitty gritty of the business, I got lost. Like trying to follow, wait, what's this guy saying? Like he says, do you get that track phone? He says, yeah, I got it through AT&T. He says, that's cool, never call me from... And there's all the stuff about the phones and stuff. And I'm like, what's happening? I can't... And there was something in issue 1 like that too, where anything else is fine, but when they get down to talking business, it's hard to follow. Maybe it's deliberately... Yeah,
sometimes it's not quite... You have to kind of intuit some of it. Like when the guy says, be sure to check your tail lights. And I figured that meant...
I figured that one out. Yeah,
like if the cops might pull you over for having a burnout tail light, and then they'll find you had pot. Don't let your tail lights burn out. Yeah, and then there's also this, when they're in the hotel room, all these guys, and this one white guy who says he's a Bush voter, but also claims to be the most hood guy in the room, and he's talking this total African-American English.
Yes. Yes. Well, also, this issue is interesting, too, compared to the first one, because the first one covers a lot of ground, and there's like a narration, there's a lot of captions describing things. So you get through like months and months. It covers people's graduations, new people joining, and how he gets into the business, and then these people leave and these people join, all that stuff. And this is really, they're waiting for the supplier for 20 pages in this motel room. It's just it's really like one scene. It's really pretty remarkable jump from like a change in narrative strategy from the first issue.
Yeah.
He doesn't really give you a lot of description and stuff. You get a sense of the kind of people he has to hang out with, like this white guy that thinks he's black, and what it's like to wait and being his first time and all that kind of stuff, and the Nokia phone and all that stuff. But it's just really a long, almost a single scene until he leaves, and then we get a second scene where he's driving through DC, which is much shorter. It's just a few pages. And then he opens his bag, and then it's the end of the issue. It's really a quick turnover.
Yeah, the first issue, had a lot of pages that it was more like an illustrated prose book rather than a comic. And this book only has a couple of pages like that, and the rest are straight up comics.
Yeah.
And the same coloring scheme as the first issue, the kind of black, gray, and green, appropriate to the topic.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know, you must have talked about this when you covered the first issue, but I love the black bars over everyone's eyes. But Chad,
their identities.
Even though it's a comic and nobody's gonna identify them from a comic strip, it's just the funniest thing. And but it kind of helps you keep track of who Chad is when he's, it's very easy to know where he is in the room. Especially in the first issue, it's like, who's the person speaking? And it's him, because everybody else's eyes are blacked out. It's so funny. And I wanted to say, after every time we do a autobio comic, I'm like, okay, no more autobio comics, even though they're always really good. But then every time after I read one, I'm like, well, we're really lucky that we have somebody that has an interesting experience and is able to write or draw or both about it. Because otherwise we wouldn't get this kind of insight in comic book form about what it's like to be a kind of mid-level drug dealer in a affluent city. It's interesting how he draws this scene where he drives through past the Capitol and stuff. We're very lucky that he knows how to write and pace a comic book and has found somebody to draw it, and we can actually have this story. Because otherwise, you're going to have a prose novel or, I don't know, an article or a movie or something, a more bland format for this tale, which is really pretty interesting, the way he's laid out. I never would have thought I would have found this as engaging as I did.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really like a plotted story. I mean, it just feels like real life. It's not like,
yes,
there are drug dealers chasing him or something.
Yeah. No, he talks about how it's all kind of, it's just the afterword in the first issue. He talks about how it's, I don't know the afterword, but it was all very, I mean, he had difficulties because of the laws, but it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that dramatic, it seems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not like the cops are on his tail or anything. It's just...
No, it's nothing like that. Yeah. Yeah. But, yeah, and it's interesting, too, that his memory must be pretty good for this, because this, is, almost 20 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
So that always impresses me, too, whenever anybody has a memory that's that sharp that they can pull up all this stuff.
Yeah, I don't know how much else I have to say about it. It's just kind of...
I wonder do we have any insight into how many issues he's going to do?
Yeah, I have no idea how many issues he's expecting to do with this.
Because based on the first one, I thought it would be, pretty quick. Because, there's a lot of information in there. But based on this one, okay.
It's kind of slowing down the narrative now,
yeah. To cover it, if it's going to be like scene by scene like this.
Yeah, now he's just arrived at the point where he's thinking, now I got to sell this stuff. Yeah, he's got his supply, and now he needs to move out the inventory.
Yes.
So.
And it also says that he quit. In the last line says both Juliet and Chad quit smoking the herb in 2021. And I'm wondering why. I'd like to. I'm curious to read that issue.
Yeah, why did they quit?
Especially living in Amsterdam, isn't that supposed to be like where it's...
Yeah, it's totally legal
really
there.
Easy access. I heard it was like illegal, but nobody cared.
Something like that. Anyway, you're not going to get in trouble there.
No, yeah. Curious.
Coming up, the high-quality anthology collection Megillah Sunday Funnies, curated by Chad himself. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. Deconstructing Comics earns a bit of money from your purchase that helps us keep the show going. We really appreciate your support. Edward and Alphonse Elric, as a result of attempting the forbidden act of resurrecting their mother with alchemy, have paid the price. Edward lost an arm and a leg. Alphonse lost his whole body, his soul now attached to a suit of armor. Together they search for a way to make their bodies complete again and uncover a deadly plot by their country's military rulers. That's the concept of Hiromu Arakawa's Fullmetal Alchemist, one of the best manga ever made. Tim and Patrick are rereading Arakawa's masterwork in search of interesting sound effects, translation errors, goofy humor, and, oh yeah, a great story. The podcast is The Law of Equivalent Exchange, a chapter-by-chapter look at the manga Fullmetal Alchemist. New episodes every other Monday, wherever podcasts are found. What are you willing to exchange? Well, then let's move on to the other thing that he sent us, which is not something that he wrote, but he sort of managed. On the front page it says that this was conceived, curated, managed, edited, and published by Chad Bilyeu of Bistro Books. So this is Megillah Sunday Funnies, and it's an anthology of 35 artists. I guess most of them are living or have lived in Amsterdam, I guess. Mm-hmm. So Chad worked with a library in Amsterdam to hold an exhibit of these 35 creators' one-page comics, got them paid for it, and at the end of the exhibit, the originals were auctioned off. And then this was printed up as a newspaper format, one run of 2,000 copies, and people who came to the exhibit were able to get this for free. And apparently he still got copies, and he's giving them out free when people make a purchase of one of his other books from his website at chadinamsterdam.nl.
So we're reviewing this, but you almost can't get it.
Well, I mean, if you buy something else from him, I guess you can get a paper copy of it.
Okay, but he's going to run out.
Yeah, so it's a limited time offer. So I don't know if he's going to be making it available digitally. I have no idea. I mean, he sent it to us digitally.
Well, this PDF, I have to say, is not... I mean, I wanted to read the newspaper. I wanted to read a Sunday page. Sure. And PDF's a little bit hard to read on the screen because you have to zoom it in so you can only read like a tier at a time. Or like a third of a page at a time.
Right, yeah, it'd be nice to have the experience of reading it in a newspaper format.
Yes. Although DC did try this, 10, 15 years ago with that thing called Wednesday Comics.
Yeah, Wednesday Comics.
Yeah. And it was a weird little experiment. But I remember buying a few of those at the time. It was weird for that because it was all continuing stories. They weren't like one-page comics. They were like, come back next week for the next.
Well, they only know how to do serialized.
That's right.
Stories.
So it's actually, I think the real revelatory thing about this is if you want to do a little experiment with your layout or even a story or narrative or anything, this is the way to do it. It's just, if you got one page and somebody's paying you and you can do it in color, I mean, that's ideal conditions for a little experimentation, I think.
Yeah, and of course some of them, kind of comment on the format. The second one by Gary and Laura Dumm has some actual comics characters in it. Little Nemo and
Popeye and Crazy Cat
from Crazy Cat. Yeah, Charlie Brown and Snoopy, Calvin and Hobbes, Dick Tracy. So yeah, I suggested. I mean, we're not going to sit here and go through all 35, but I suggested, why don't we pick out our favorite 3? Actually, I picked 3, and then I've got 3 or 4 others I'd just like to briefly comment on. So what were your 3?
Well, I don't know about exactly 3, but there was the one about the going insane in the Brian on page 21, because I laughed out loud at this one. And it's by Michael, I got to zoom this in, Michael Hacker? Yes, and it's really beautifully drawn in a very cartoony style, and it's this brain inside a guy's head, a guy named Brian, and the brain is sick of having to think the same thoughts over and over again, and is going crazy and wants to be set free and considers killing itself, and then decides not to because Brian is helpless without him, and then he decides he's just going to think happy thoughts about rainbows and unicorns, and grow some positive mental attitude, and he's going to take over. And then you get outside of the brain, you only see the silhouette of Brian. And in the last panel, he's cackling maniacally while other silhouettes of other people are looking at him curiously. And I laughed out loud. I thought it was really funny, this one. So that was my first pick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you want to do one, or do you want me to go into another one?
So we haven't checked. We might have some overlap.
Sure.
So on, let's see, it's page... Yeah, we had a little issue with the page numbering in the PDF, but page 9, Mayhem in Alphabet Town, by Bernie, how do you pronounce it?
Bernie Moreau. So Bernie Moreau is a legend.
Okay.
He used to do this, I think he's Canadian, or at least he was born in France and grew up in Canada. And he used to do this comic in the 80s called The Jam, which was a deconstructionist superhero comic, like way before that was a popular thing, but it was when it was starting to crawl into consciousness. And that was a really cool comic, and he was a great artist. And as soon as I started reading this one on page 9, I was like, whoa, this art is really good. Yeah. And of course, because I was reading it in the zoomed-in PDF, somehow I didn't look at his name in the first tier. And then at the very bottom, I was like, oh, yeah, of course it's Bernie Moreau, because it's got that, he's got the inking style where things have a kind of three-dimensionality to them, where he puts in the little feathering.
The characters are all letters of the alphabet. And, yeah, just looking more closely at the beginning of it here. So we see, welcome to Alphabet Town, population 26. And then it's, by a highway, and we kind of zoom in on this over 3 panels. There's a really tiny panel of the highway, and then it gets larger and larger, and there's a putt, putt, putt growing louder, and you see the letter U is writing like a tractor.
Yeah.
And, by the way, there's a little note there that says, note, all characters speak with fake British accents.
Yeah.
And the U on the sign changes population 26 to population 25, and then drives away, and the panels get smaller and smaller again. Yeah, then we see S and W playing, like, badminton without a net.
Yeah.
And then another letter comes and says something terrible has happened, and Q has been murdered, and Q is lying on the ground in a pool of blood. And so they're trying to figure out who the murderer is. I mean, your choices are limited in population 25. And so the letters all line up in order, and O is standing between P and R. And so they're puzzled, like, what happened to O? And, oh, you're in Q's slot. And he says, whoops, and he moves over. And then they realize that that's actually Q, and he's the murderer of O. And he pulled out his, spoiler alert, he pulled the what do they call it? The crossbar out and used it to murder O. And because he wanted to be a vowel.
Right.
He had vowel envy.
Yeah.
And he ends up in the insane asylum. But yeah, I mean, it's really engaging, really, really beautiful art, I have to say.
Yeah. Yeah, we should cover The Jam on the show someday. Yeah. I picked that one out too, but there was a lot of them that I noticed. A Day with Oma, so this one is on page 13. Really touching story about this girl's relationship with her grandmother?
Yeah, I assume that Oma must be like...
Yes, she says she's her grandchild. Yes, this is my grandchild, she says.
This is coming out of Holland, so the Netherlands. So there is some Dutch... There are a couple of comics in here that were in Dutch, and Google Translate did a lousy job on them when I tried it. But
I didn't try that, but one of them you can follow. We'll get to that one. There was one that was not in English, but I was able to follow what was happening anyway. But this one is just, it's like the same format. So it's 1999, and this little girl goes to visit her grandmother. Her mother takes her there. And then she, like, goes around the neighborhood with her grandmother. Then she eats with her grandmother. And then she sleeps in bed with her grandmother. And then each tier of the comic is, like, several years later. But it's the same thing. It's, like, how she arrives, grandma's relationship with the neighborhood, how she eats with her, and how she sleeps with her, or not, or goes home.
Mm-hmm.
So it changes over the years, and then finally she shows up one day, and 16 years after the first arrival, and grandma's not there anymore. And it's by somebody named Steric, and it's just a little moving little moment, really.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was heartbreaking, even without the grandma's condition at the end, because you just see this kind of distance building between her and her grandma as she gets older.
Yeah, and then she's gone, and then grandma's gone, and that's life. Yeah.
I mean, in the first one, when she says she's 5.5 there, and she's sitting at the table eating with her grandma, and they say goodnight to each other, and then 2 years later, the girl is not sitting at the table with grandma; she's sitting in an easy chair. I presume she's Then we go and have dinner. I get to watch television, is the caption. So she's watching TV, and she falls asleep before grandma can say goodnight to her. And then in 2009, she would be 15, and she seems even more distant. She won't even answer grandma's questions.
And grandma's no longer going around the neighborhood. She's become one of those old people that is suspicious of people and conservative. Yeah,
we see her.
She's changed as well.
Using binoculars, looking out the window when the girl arrives on her bicycle.
Yeah, she's not looking at the girl. She's spying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she's become distant too in her own way.
Yeah. And this is really beautifully drawn. I mean, I have to say, overall, I mean, it's an unusually high level of quality control for an anthology. I mean, not all of them landed with me. Some of them just didn't speak to me at all, but I think that they were all well done.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, there's one, like, on page 17, there's this one by Bayane One, which is just this weird, psychedelic, like, creatures divided into panels. Don't really know what's going on, but the drawings are just incredible. But there's a couple in here like that are just like, I can't follow this. And some of them have really crazy, like there's one on page 19 by Eric Y, which is, it's got this crazy layout. I can't tell what's happening.
Yeah.
It's called the Papago Trail, but it's really beautifully drawn. And if you have the freedom to, if you've got one page and you've been given the freedom to experiment, this is the place to do it. This is the place and time to try something really different with the layouts and see what happens. So yeah, I mean, it didn't, like this Papago Trail one, I mean, I looked at it, I didn't understand it, but I certainly was glad people were out there experimenting with it and trying something different, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there are several that can be like read in more than one direction, maybe. Yes,
there are a couple, like that. Yeah.
Like page 22. This was not one that I'd picked out, but the one by Dido Drachman. It's about this woman's relationship with her, I guess, husband and whether they can have kids. And then I don't know if these are supposed to be like alternate realities. I don't know. It's
called Choices, right?
Choices, yeah. So I just saw Everything Everywhere All at Once yesterday, and so it's kind of reminding me of that.
Yeah, it is a bit like that. Yeah, because in the other, it seems like there's, but the way that you can't tell the way the panels are lined up. It looks like It looks like a colored glass window, like the way it's all like it's just these little pieces of panels in there.
Yeah, it seems to be kind of color coded for this is one possibility and this is another possibility.
Yeah. But again, so you got one page, just mess around, and it's not, they've already been paid for it.
Page 10, Monica Gallagher's Geographical Niceties. I thought that was interesting, where she says she grew up in Maryland, she was always an East Coaster, and she just expected rudeness from people in service occupations and so forth, and she moves to Texas and she's like blown away by people being nice to her. So she says with her upbringing on the East Coast, she just kind of expected bad things to happen all the time, and she's kind of having a moment of realization that maybe life is not like that for everybody.
Yeah, no, and also there's really poignant moment at the end where she's like, well, what else is there for me to learn if I go to other places as well at the end?
Mm-hmm.
And this is interesting because it was followed by another one, which is also about a guy moving across the coast from one side of the country to the other, from Cleveland to Portland. And there's a great panel at the very last, at the bottom tier, where he's driving across country. I didn't really note this one, but these two in a row were kind of similar, and I actually thought next time Chad does one of these, he should have a theme, a loose theme, an organizing theme of some sort that might, I don't know, make it easier to latch onto in some way.
Well, yeah, I mean, this sort of had a theme of Sunday Funnies, but not everybody stuck to that exactly.
Right.
Although I'm looking at page 7, The Crimson Devil by James Corcoran. I liked how it looked like it was drawn by Milton Caniff. Including the logo of the Crimson Devil reminded me of the Steve Canyon logo.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, he's been studying Caniff clearly, and he's just kind of the inking and the coloring of it, and it just it looks an awful lot like Caniff's work.
There's a few, like the second to or page 34. There's a tribute to Peanuts / Crazy Cat going on this weird. Again, this is a surreal one that doesn't make any sense. No. It's got a head on top of Snoopy's house, looking up at the sky. 2 meteors come in from opposite directions. And then there's a tier of a little bomb that's about to explode as the fuse goes down. The fuse ends, doesn't explode, and then you got this worm thing in Crazy Cat's landscape. It looks like there's a tree that's shaped like mutts in the background. I'm not really sure what's going on in this thing, but yes, he was like, okay, Sunday Funnies. Then we got a page of Popeye, and the very last page is a bit of a Goldberg thing going on, and there's Katzenjammer Kids are down there in one corner as well. So some people are like, oh yeah, Sunday Funnies, I'll just do that, and some people are like, I'm just going to do whatever I want with one page. Another one I really laughed at was on page 24. There's a story about this wrestler called El Buscabroncas, and it's by somebody named Schwanz. And it's this wrestler. It's so amazingly drawn in a kind of animation style.
Yeah.
And this wrestler throws this other wrestler into a suitcase and goes to this elaborate like spy versus spy thing where he calls a cab and takes him to another country and leaves him at the airport on a bench. So that somebody reports an unattended suitcase, and then the cops take it away and they blow it up, and then the wrestler is triumphant at the end.
Well, there was a point of that I didn't get right away, but so at the beginning you see that wrestler is wearing a wristwatch, and so he's put in that suitcase, and the security guy hears it and thinks it's a bomb.
Oh, right.
And so he calls the bomb squad, and they blow it up. And then, the hero wrestler is, back at the ring. He's celebrating.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention page 8, Greensboro, North Carolina, USA, by Audra Stang.
Yes, this is a good one. Yeah.
And it's just autobiographical. She says, by the late 2000s, the newspaper in Greensboro had been delivered by adults for decades, including my parents. And her mom is substituting for somebody else and delivering papers. She trips in the dark and breaks her arm. And of course, this is America, so she doesn't have health insurance. So just buys a sling at the drugstore. And now she can't work the gear shift. So Audra rides with her, works the gear shift, and delivers the papers while her mom puts her foot on the gas and knows where she's going.
Yeah.
And then it ends where she's at school and her classmates saying, why do you wear ripped clothes that don't fit? And she just says, I don't know.
Yeah. This is a perfect for one page, right? Dug this one too.
Should mention Rochelle Myers on page 29. That's Meyer, apostrophe S. I said, she's been on Deconstructing Comics before. She's drawn some comics for Chad. But she does a historical story here, Francesca's Last Dance. I had never heard the story.
Me neither.
I looked it up on Wikipedia after I read the comic, and it said basically the same thing, although it said they've never been able to verify some of the details. Some of it might have been affected by rumor, but it's this Francesca was a ballet dancer during the Holocaust, and she's Jewish, and she gets rounded up, and she, at the last second when she knows she's going to go to the gas chambers, she attacks a guard, takes his gun, and kills him. And it's kind of a revolt by the other people, but of course it's put down, and goodbye to them. But yeah, it's an interesting story, and the rumor of it was sort of buoying the hopes of Jews as they heard about it in other camps.
Yeah, that was a really good one. Interesting. Yeah, because again, I'd never heard of it, and it really fits well on one page. It's kind of a good one-page story, especially since some of it's not verified. The Phantom Wig on page 14.
That was a weird one.
Weird, but the art is amazing. It's done in this retro 1920s style, I guess, 30s, 40s. Really just amazing to look at, and this fashion police adventure drawn by this person, Ryan Heshka. Wow, just amazing to look at. I don't know if it's the greatest. I probably won't think about it tomorrow, but looking at it was amazing. Oh, and there's a Jay Stevens strip in here, and there's Rich Tommaso as well. So there's some heavy hitters in here for sure. Mm-hmm. And there was another one I wanted to point out was, on page 31, there's one called 12, and it's just this guy trying to figure out how many sugars to put in his wife's coffee. And the artwork is really interesting. It looks like it was photo referenced. I think I have to assume that it's just the way the angles are. It kind of looks like Meanwhile or something like that. He's altered it in a way that it looks. The colors are really extreme and stuff, but definitely looks like it's photo referenced in some way, or somehow he's used pictures to do it. Just a weird little comic, but I thought the art was interesting.
On page 33, there's a comic by James the Stanton, which the name stuck out for me because recently Jason and I talked about the second issue of Thready on Critiquing Comics, and he drew that also. But I think his art works a lot better for this comic than for Thready. And maybe it's just his sort of anatomy is working better here, although there aren't any humans in the story. It's about this creature, Agthbar the Extemporaneous, who lives on like a planet which is actually an electron that's part of an atom that makes up a plastic dinosaur toy that's for sale at a dollar store in Eugene, Oregon. Yeah. How he knows that, I don't know. But yeah, some really nice dinosaur art in this. And
I think this is actually a pretty good comic about how difficult it is to understand quantum mechanics. Because at the end, it just becomes gobbledygook. Like they talk about, it starts with the explanation about an electron and the carbon atom and stuff like that. I was like, oh, okay. But then at the end, they're talking about Klurfsk, or whatever he is.
Yeah, it's some kind of a game, Klurf.
Game or something. It just becomes this kind of nonsense thing at the end.
Yeah, well, he's going into how, because it's on a completely different scale, time is also different. He says, in fact, 1 year on the planet Roger, where he lives, is equal to a third of an instant on the Earth. So in the time it takes you to read this comic, my life as Agthbar will have come and gone. So yeah, this kind of throws it off. But yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's well drawn. I like the art on this, and he since it's Sunday Funnies, he does this kind of Ben Day Dots thing with it, which several of the others did too. Right, that's right. Yes, good point. Yeah. Page 16 is one of the ones that was not in English, but it was very clear to me what was happening, which is this guy's looking in a mirror at his torn up coat, and he goes somewhere, and everybody's laughing at his torn coat, and then he's like, he needs to get a nice coat somehow, and he decides to steal one from someone he sees on the street, and then he steals it and he wears it, and it says Prada on the back, which I think is supposed to be Prada, and everybody laughs at him because it's fake. She says fake in English, and then he's angry, and then I'm guessing he's like, I need to get another coat. That's my guess as to what happens. That makes sense. Yeah, I hadn't quite put that together with the brand. That's why she's saying fake in English. Yeah. The other one in Dutch, let's see, page 26, which turns out to be a commercial for hot sauce.
Yes.
And
I kind of figured that out.
yeah, I looked at it with Google Translate, and yeah, the slogan at the end says, "You have never been closer to hell."
Right.
And we see this guy kind of, the hounds of hell are after
yes,
him.
Right. Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
When he tries this hot sauce. I mean, he just guzzles the hot sauce, so that's the bad idea. And then, I don't know, this girl, I guess that's his daughter. She calls him Papa. She's dressed like she lives in Wakanda or something. I'm not sure what's going on there.
Yeah, it does look like a superhero thing, though. It's Suleiman de Marionette. And there's kind of a supervillain guy in the first panel, it looks like. Maybe he was manipulating him into drinking the hot sauce.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, because there's like some hypnotism going on in the panels there.
Yeah, I see. So, we've covered more than I thought we would. But, yeah, it's an interesting collection. Yeah, so if you want to buy the re-up issue 2 or something else from Chad, if you do it in time, you can get a copy of this for nothing.
Cool.
The Megillah Sunday Funnies exhibit is going on now in Amsterdam through May 26th. If you're going to be in town, check the link in the show notes for more information. For all of Chad's available work, check out chadinamsterdam.nl. If you've enjoyed this week's show or any other Deconstructing Comics episodes, tell your friends. Share your favorite episodes on your social media. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube by clicking our social media buttons at deconstructingcomics.com. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and we'll critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read it and record our critique. It was recently announced that comics writer Rachel Pollack is in poor health, and we here at Deconstructing Comics thought we should talk about her work. Kumar and Emmett already discussed Pollack's Doom Patrol run back in episode 751, but another possibility came up. Her 5-issue miniseries Timebreakers, released in 1997, with art by Chris Weston, the most popular series of DC's canceled imprint Helix. So Kumar and Emmett will be discussing that time travel series next week. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.